This is great. We're getting lots of interchange outside of the formal part of this, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. But there were a couple of people who wanted to make some statements. Nicholas, I need your microphone. Mandy here had quite an observation, and I'd like her to tell us about that. Just leave it on.
I've got a really loud voice. I'm good. So I work for Highway Safety, so I kind of have that in my blood, but I'm also the mom of a new driver, and that will put way more gray in your hair than anything else. I'm really strict with my new driver. For the last year, when he's driving, I'm constantly, he always puts his seatbelt on, he's really good, but my fear is that my kid's gonna be the one that wrecks and hurts someone else. Not all parents are as strict as I am. And a helicopter parent was brought up earlier. I probably am a helicopter parent. You know what? If that's what gets my kid to 80 years old, I'm fine with that. But I think we need to figure out how to get to the parents and to get them to understand they're not the friends, they're the parents. When you break that rule, you lose your phone, you lose your car, and I'll drive your happy rear end back to school myself.
Oh, no.
We get so used to saying, I don't want that burden anymore of taking you to early morning practice or band practice or this or that we just shove all the responsibility on them. We have to take that back. Parents need to be more responsible. My second question is, we really, with the NTSB publications and with our publications, we try to get away from calling them accidents. FYI, I did see the word accident in one of the publications that's here, and I was just wondering.
We're talking about crashes.
We are talking about crashes. So if we can get the news media to follow suit, to stop calling them accidents and call them crashes. Karyan comes into my home every night and tells me what's going on. So if we have that across the board where they're crashes and not accidents, will that trigger something in someone's mind that will not accept the crash and it be unacceptable? So those are my two pieces.
Got it.
And Vice Chairman, before you answer that, I do think that it would be nice to explain, because a lot of folks will hear NTSB mentioning accident and you will hear say crash. And we say accidents in some incidents. Our mandate or our policy as it lays out said that we investigate accident investigation, and aviation and marine and pipeline is slightly different than highway. Highway, we say crashes because they're preventable. But if you hear the board member, the vice chairman saying accidents, he's intertwining. So if you want to explain, talk a little about that.
Yeah, sometimes I misspeak. It doesn't happen often. What the vice chairman meant to say when he said accident was crash. Officer Eric, you knew this was coming. Tell him your story.
So I have an adorable 5-year-old niece, and she walks up to me the other day and she goes, "Aunt Steffi." I go, "Oh gosh." She goes, "Mommy drives with her knees." Why does Mommy drive with her knees? Because she's on her phone. Are you kidding me? Like, this is what I do for a living. I'm in a traffic unit. My entire purpose is hazardous moving violations. And my own sister, with my 5-year-old niece in the car, is texting and driving constantly that she notices. And at 5, she knows it's wrong because she's tattling to the police officer. I have a 12-year-old in my life who constantly is saying, "Okay, it's pretty cool, you can drive with your knees," right? So by 5 to 12, what became an unacceptable behavior is now such a social norm that they no longer see the problem. And that's where we're really failing our kids.
Thank you. Be right with you. Lawrence, you haven't had the opportunity to say anything. You've been also well behaved, but we're going to fix that now. You represent pedestrians.
I do. I represent an organization that focuses on safety for vulnerable road users, so pedestrian, people that ride bicycles, people in wheelchairs, sight impaired, and even people that use public transit. And the reason I'm kind of up here is because those individuals are the most vulnerable road users out there. They don't have a shell of metal around them to protect them when struck. And in that case, what has come over the last few years, in particular the last several years, is these road users are more disproportionately affected by distracted driving, because if they get hit, the chances of them dying is much more likely. And so this has become a very serious issue for us. And the thing I kind of want to talk a little bit about is as I've kind of heard some voices, and there's some great programs out there, some great initiatives, some great campaigns, you know, one of the things I think we need to continue to focus on, there's a lot of steps to take. I truly believe the next step is the legislature in passing some substantial policy that helps us create behavior change. We have seen throughout history that simply by educating and simply by promoting behavioral change is pretty easy to do, and it does move the needle, but I think it's time for our legislator to step up and take some action. I almost want to call out those that aren't in the room. Thank you to Representative Kip Kendrick, Sarah Walsh's husband were here a second ago, but it's not lost on me the fact that they're not here. And they're not here to hear your stories. They're not here to hear the importance of this work and what needs to change, what needs to happen, not only to protect the people that are out there walking, kids walking to school, an elderly person who has lost their license and is just trying to cross the street to the grocery store, but those people that are in their cars as well driving. You know, your son, protecting your son so he's not struck by someone texting and driving or using some sort of device. And, you know, step up, legislator. The voices are out there. We've heard here several times the public supports this. We heard that this is a constituent-based legislator. They are, but also they sometimes have their own political agendas that they want to say, I'm the one that didn't pass laws this year. But guess what? Those laws you didn't pass are killing people. So step up, please.
Thank you. Robert?
Well, I represent motorcyclists, and it's a dangerous hobby. There's no doubt about it. But we take that risk as a motorcycle operator. There's ways to mitigate risk, wearing the proper clothing, taking training lessons. But I have not determined a way to mitigate the risk of distracted driving, because it happens so quick. I might be riding along next to an automobile. He looks fine, she looks fine, both hands on the wheel. I feel safe, and all of a sudden they reach over to grab their phone, or they reach over for something else, and now I'm at risk. You know, if it's a car where the wheels are going like this, I back off. You know, I know that's a dangerous situation. If it's a pickup truck with stuff piled up, I know it's a dangerous situation. But I have not been able to figure out how to detect early on a distracted driver. And it really frustrates me. And it's a risk that I have to make up my mind whether I'm going to continue to ride a motorcycle or not.
Thank you. John, quickly?
This was to address something Mandy said that kind of triggered a thought, and it's related to media. So it's somehow that we don't put ownership to the problem. Even when we write something, I'll read an article that says vehicle 1 ran into the tree. Well, right now we're not autonomous completely to that stage. So where's the responsibility? Driver, whatever, made a mistake and hit the tree. So it's like even our society's got to start changing to that side.
You're getting into a very interesting and complicated area. Hold that thought. We're now into corporate involvement and what companies can do. Katherine with National Safety Council, talk to us about that.
Sure. So I'm with the National Safety Council, and our mission is to end preventable deaths at work, on the road, and in our homes and communities. Since we are a membership organization, we do everything we can to keep employers and employees safe. So we introduced a safe driving kit that allows companies to implement corporate distracted driving policies based on best practices. Hundreds of companies, large and small, have taken advantage of it and are implementing policies at work, including in our own workplace. We have a zero tolerance policy, as you do at NTSB, for driving or doing anything hands-free in our cars. Companies can and should step up to take the lead in crafting policies to save their employees' lives. Our toolkit provides case studies, best practices, and examples on how to do this. So again, while Missouri is in the process of looking at and revising and building stronger laws around distracted driving, companies can be accountable, leaders can take charge, and set the example for their companies by drafting a cell phone policy ban and making sure that employees are following it. That's one step in the right direction and something you can do and take action on today.
Very good. Flint,
Good morning.
good morning.
You know, Missouri Employers Mutual, Missouri's largest work comp employer. I kind of have a different perspective on some of this. I'm in the work comp lane, so it's employees on the job. My life would be easier if we had legislation that would allow us to say this is the state law. I am also in a lane where OSHA is virtually silent on the regulation. They'll tell you to follow motor carrier stuff. They'll say to wear a seatbelt, ride a forklift. They'll tell you not to ride around loose in the back of a pickup truck on a job site. But once you go on the public roadway, the number one way to die on the job is not addressed, period. Okay, there's some letters in there and whatnot, but as far as OSHA regulations, it's not there. So I'm in a place where the business owners say, hey, there's no state law. I'm worried about compliance. OSHA's who I'm worried about. I'm worried about getting a fine from them. But there is nothing there. So it is the number one way to die on the job. Employers have a responsibility, you could say, under the general duty clause of OSHA, where you've got to provide a safe, healthy workplace, that you could do it there. But the National Safety Council, been a defensive driving instructor for 25 plus years. Well, the simplest things in there is the RUA. RUA, safe driver. You got to recognize the hazard, understand the defense, and act correctly in time. Well, guess what? Everything's based upon what? You actually have to recognize the hazard. When I teach the defensive driving, I actually talk about what a windshield is for. I know that might sound simple, but I'm telling you, we take time to go over what a windshield is designed for. So
Well, it
employers.
stops you from going out over the hood if you're not wearing your seatbelt.
No, yeah, it is not an approved means of exit, no.
There are a number of people who have tested it.
It's been done, and it's very unfortunate, and so we spent a lot of time, we're Missouri's largest work comp employer. We're running around 800, 900 recommendations a year to business owners, basically begging them to implement seatbelt policies, distracted driving policies.
How much does it cost your organization if somebody is injured or killed in a distracted driving situation?
Well, you know, that kind of depends. I mean, there are those things where they have the fender bender. We as the work comp carrier are never involved. There are those things where it's a fatality. They're young, they're not married, they have no children. Per state law, the settlement on that, if there was no aid rendered at the site, would be $5,000. With that said, some of our largest work comp claims, I can think of several, one of the highest ones, $8.6 million for a worker that the vehicle that crashed, a semi, laid it over, was not totaled, simply fell from the driver's side to the passenger side, broke his neck in 3 places, and, you know, they're paralyzed for life. They, you know, all that money is really going where? It's going to the medical care that person is going to require for the rest of their life.
Doug, I'm watching you sort of agree with this, and that you're sort of at the tip of the spear on some of this, being an attorney.
I'm the fox in the hen house. I have brought cases against employers when an employee has caused a distracted driving accident. And I take depositions of safety directors. And I have some advice for corporations to protect themselves against the likes of people like me who are representing victims. Get a corporate policy, but it doesn't stop there. Because if you have a corporate policy and you don't train it in, that's a seize point for me. You mean you know this is a problem, but you don't educate it in? What we need to do, this is a solution, I think, is corporations have these corporate wellness programs. I can't understand why driving safety, distracted driving prevention isn't a part of every corporate wellness program. We train in nutrition, fitness, health-related items, but we completely ignore, as was mentioned earlier, this number one problem and liability producer. So that would be, coming from my perspective, a way to stop the likes of me is I can't prove corporate neglect when you've gone to the extent of having a prevention program that you regularly, constantly train in.
Excellent. A couple weeks ago, I was speaking to a national trucking group. These are the fleet owners, Walmart, FedEx, the big trucks that you see out on the highways. And almost all of them have now taken to having inward and outward facing cameras, which again, you saw a quick video of that. And that goes to the whole concept of trust but verify, that they're making a real effort to say, hey, we know what you're doing, we want you to do the right thing. And one of the companies that we work for has, again, a zero tolerance policy. They say, if we see you or we find out that you're using your phone inappropriately, you're done. You're not going to be working here anymore. And nothing like economics to kind of, again, clear people's minds. But we also talked briefly about the money that's involved in these things. The state of Missouri, in round numbers, $1.7 billion last year. Some of it going to you, some of it going to other places. I don't want to besmirch your livelihood here, but you could be doing other things as opposed to having the loss of life and all of the tragedy that goes along with that. We had a question from the internet that somebody wanted to know what should, and this is for the panel as a whole, what should a driver do if they're driving along and they see somebody on their cell phone and not doing well, steering with their knees perhaps, or whatever it happens to be. And it seems like having them call the police is a little hypocritical. So police officers, any thoughts? Captain John? Any thoughts on how should you be notified and be able to do something?
Well, of course, we have the Star 55 number for people that have issues. If you're seeing someone like that and you can get off the road and then make that call, that would be our recommendation. But obviously pay attention to that person, get away from them so that if they do have a crash, you're not involved.
Okay. Sergeant Curtis, you ever gotten a call like that?
We do get calls from the public. I mean, they do call in. Bad drivers, you want to call it that. I mean, ideally, you'd like to, if they had a passenger in the car, it'd be the passenger calling and not the driver.
Right,
So-
right. So can you do anything about it?
It's going to depend on, if we have an officer in the right area to catch the violation while it's occurring is one thing. If, it's some situations you can follow up later on and if you get like some type of license plate number or some other lead to follow up on a vehicle. And
Could it even just be a conversation with them to say, hey, you were doing so poorly that you alarmed a fellow driver? And
Yes, absolutely. We actually send letters to the registered owners in them type of cases. If we just want to handle it that way, we'll send a letter to the registered owner of the vehicle saying on this date and time, your driving was poor, so.
And I guess that would go into perhaps State Farm's tracking mechanism in terms of how people are behaving in driving and that sort of thing. Yes, no?
It can potentially connect to that. From the company policy standpoint, I wanted to mention another sort of trust but verify aspect of policy. We have all company drivers at State Farm sign off on our vehicle policy, which prohibits manual use of a handheld cell phone, reading or sending texts, interacting with GPS, using a computer or taking notes, other types of behaviors like that. On the back end, for the last 2.5 years, State Farm has used what's called continuous motor vehicle record monitoring, so that when there's a change in a driver's license status or a conviction shows up, we receive a notification of that and have a process in place to review each of those on a case-by-case basis. And there's a range of actions that can be taken, from guidance and education all the way up to revoking driving privileges or even termination of the employee.
Does State Farm do a lot of corporate or fleet underwriting?
There is some commercial underwriting
Yeah.
at State Farm. It's
What
not
what is
primary
your
emphasis.
observation on that, and how does that, companies' policies and things that Katherine and Flint have talked about, how would that affect your willingness to underwrite them? And Hillary, this is also a question for you. So,
Yeah, I think every company is going to take a look at the underwriting and the risk factors and take a look at what individual company policies are, and that would be taken into consideration when underwriting a fleet.
okay. Yes, Flint.
Keep in mind, this is the state of Missouri, and as a Missouri-based employer, the work comp law changed in Missouri August 28, 2005. There are a couple of provisions in there, one specifically on safety rules, which basically says if your company has a safety policy, or just like a seatbelt policy or a distracted driving policy, and much like State Farm, you implement that, you enforce that, you follow that. If someone deviates from that, there's some punishment. If you subsequently are involved in an accident, get yourself hurt on your job as part of your employment, your work comp benefits can be reduced 25 to 50%.
So the concept of contributory negligence.
Right, so there's some accountability, typically that's paid time off or settlement type money, but there is accountability in that. If you think about it from the employer perspective, I have a loss ratio, I have an experience modifier, I have someone that I've recognized that this is the number one way to die on the job, a serious way to get injured. I've done defensive driving, I've selected the right employees, I've monitored them, I've enforced these issues, and yet I can't babysit everyone. They will go out in the vehicle representing my company, and they did something that wasn't acceptable, not part of the rules on how I operate. There's the accountability.
Understand. Lawrence, we saw in the opening section a pedestrian who was totally clueless, and I'm being charitable, about walking and so on. What does your organization have to say about people walking along and using their devices and just really not paying any attention? Oftentimes they've got headphones in so they can't hear. We've got more electric vehicles out there. So, I mean, it's a dangerous environment right next to fast-moving traffic. Do they have a responsibility as well?
Yeah, they do. Unfortunately, the data doesn't pan out that it's excessively dangerous to the point of serious injury or death. I'll let the data experts in the room point it out because sometimes it's hard to capture. But if I remember right, several years ago, the number of deaths and serious injuries related to cell phones that were the fault of the pedestrian was 6. I don't remember what year it was, or so I can't speak to that. So sure, they have a personal responsibility, but let's not blame the victim here. The person who has the greatest ability to cause harm is a person operating a large motor vehicle. Now, should you protect yourself? Absolutely. But the onus really should be on the person that can cause a lot of harm. We tell people to, obviously protect yourself. We have a dangerous transportation system in which lots of people die on. It's a public health epidemic, as was mentioned earlier. So do what you can to protect yourself in this dangerous transportation
So what about
system.
people who don't cross at crosswalks and are walking at night on roads that don't have well light or shoulders or sidewalks? I lose arguments with myself on a regular basis, and oftentimes when I'm flying, I think, let's think this through, because I know who's going to be the first one to the scene of the accident, and so I just we can have, differing viewpoints on some of this, but it seems like people do have to recognize that even if they're absolutely right, you go through a stoplight or an intersection, we know, experienced drivers do, and police officers better than most, you better be clearing that intersection even though you have a green light. And so I think we all have to kind of keep that in mind and then think about distraction across the board. So it's always great to say, well, don't blame the victim or, have somebody else, it's their fault. It may be, but you're dead.
That's absolutely true, but that's not the world I want to live in.
Well, I understand that. That's why we're having this conversation. Patrick.
I'd just like to pick up on a couple of the points that were made. When we talk about vulnerable users on the system like pedestrians and others, I just want to make the point to keep in mind that there are those that are vulnerable out on the roadways to distraction. And it's the highway workers and public safety officers that are out there trying to either build, reconstruct, or maintain the system, or to enforce the motor vehicle laws, or to respond to emergencies. We are seeing really very disturbing trends where we have employees that are literally diving out of the way on a daily basis from people driving through work zones without even recognizing that they're in a work zone. These are the types of things that, when we think about the economic impact, we have to start gauging as public safety officials whether or not we can be properly maintaining the roadways safely while people are using it. And the issue there is that's inconvenience to the public. But in order not to jeopardize the lives of those that are maintaining the roads, sometimes we're going to have to get to that point where we shut them down.
So you're going to have to close a much bigger portion.
Yeah, that's right. And that is an option here. The public won't like it, but these are the types of things that we try to find that balance. The other point on the corporate side is that even in government, when we talk about legislative action and otherwise, it really is about the underlying mission and values of every enterprise. On a state government side, Missouri Department of Transportation, one of our key values is safety. And so enforcing and putting in place a corporate policy that bans the use of cell phones while operating equipment or driving motor vehicles, that was something that wasn't in place a few years ago. So we were in a position where we were preaching rather than discussing the issue. We had to change our own behavior first before we could come, I think, legitimately to this table. And that is exactly the type of action that any leader in an organization, any organization can do. That's spread to state government in Missouri, the corporate fleet policy for the state of Missouri now, which is almost 50,000 employees, is hands-free ban while operating those vehicles. So that the work that can be done through a corporate policy, I think, can be more impactful sometimes than other means, because that's really going to hit the pocketbook.
You have a direct say in that. So, okay, I think we're going to start wrapping up here. First off, I'm going to give the audience one last opportunity here to weigh in. Any comments here from the audience on anything that we've talked about today? Okay, Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you all panelists. So I used to be a MoDOT intern back to a couple years ago, and when we talk about the employee actions, I really appreciate what MoDOT have done before. That's the Gene Pass. So basically it is we install an app, and when we drive, we just click on that app, and it would just capture that when we are driving, we did not touch the cell phone, and if we accumulate so much miles, then we could get a pass that we are allowed to wear jeans to go to work. And I know my colleagues, they are really into it, and I actually complete my intern before the jeans pass came out. And when I back there and visit, and I see them wearing jeans, and they're so proud that, oh, it is the jeans pass. And I feel like that.
So that's an incentive, right?
Yeah, I would say that this is what an agency or company could do without like extra budget. and encourage the employees to drive safely without
So
distraction.
Starbucks gift certificates, not to advertise any
Yeah, I
particular
would
coffee.
say like
but-
some encouragement
Yeah,
or
sure.
penalty maybe. And I remember seeing a lady, her vehicle was like swinging around on the highway on 63, and we were driving at 70, and I looked at the plate, I recognized where she works at. And that kind of hurt my feeling that how could a MoDOT employee drive and text? And that's completely against the Jeans Pass thing. So I would say, like, maybe in an engineering perspective, maybe we could share this app, like, across the country or just across the state, and then the companies and agencies could just register under it and say that we share this app, and then
I
we
think that's a great-
award our employees.
That's a great idea. We had a question here, or a comment?
Just getting back to the vulnerable road users. You know, they're not choosing to do that because they're just carefree with their lives. Usually they don't have a choice. We have a system that doesn't allow them, you know, like a sidewalk might end. So they're getting to jobs because, you know, that's what
I
they
understand.
have
I
to
absolutely
do.
understand that.
Yeah, that's just the only point I wanted to make is
Okay.
like, it's not like they're just, you know, risking their life because they don't care or they're distracted.
No, your point is very well taken. I think the point I was trying to make is that if you are in a vulnerable situation, don't become more vulnerable by being distracted on your phone or listening on your headphones or something like that. So excellent point. Okay, we are coming down the home stretch here in the aviation world. We call it final approach for a smooth touchdown. Everybody on the panel gets to make a quick, succinct, brilliant observation on what you've gotten out of this, and then perhaps what your takeaway is. So, as I say, be brilliant and brief. Carry on.
My takeaway from all of this is that it's a problem, and you know we all have a platform to use, and that in order
Yours
to,
is a big one.
Yeah, I'm saying in order to try to eliminate this problem and get something going, then we have to
And what
be
are you,
proactive.
And what are you
So,
going to do about it?
Continue to share your stories with me. I'll continue to those press releases MoDOT sends out. Law enforcement will continue to put those out there, but if you have a personal story, continue to share it because that definitely touches.
I think you have
the
an
hearts of the
outlet here,
viewers,
folks, that could resonate.
So yes, come see me.
Yeah, great. Kevin?
Well, we've talked a lot about the power of choice at the individual level, and as representatives of institutions, all these institutions and industries have choices as well about what we choose to emphasize in our policies, what we choose to emphasize in our outreach to media outlets and the community, what we choose to focus on with our philanthropy programs and our community programs. We all have a lot of choice, and we can make this a priority, and we can change the conversation, and we can change the culture as a result.
Excellent. Hillary?
Sure. I would say probably my takeaway from this is hope. We have been working to pass legislation here in Missouri, and looking around the room, seeing all of the interest, I think there is hope that we can get something done and moved forward in the legislature in the 2020 legislative cycle. So I think that's my takeaway as to what I'm going to do. My organization is going to be working to lobby on behalf of getting the legislation passed.
Good for you. Good for you. Lawrence?
My takeaway is that there are a lot of great people here in the state of Missouri being represented on this panel doing what the communities are asking for. We have some great programs, some great educational pieces being put out, some great campaigns, and we have a lot of people practicing what I preach. I think it's huge that we point out that MoDOT is practicing what they preach. I think that is massive, massive show of support.
50,000 employees.
Yes, it's wonderful. I think the next step now is we need to pass some legislation that helps us support behavioral change as well as technologies that will help us support our behavioral change.
Excellent. Robert?
I'm very encouraged. Didn't know much about distracted driving till I got involved in this. And I look forward to being a lobbyist, talking to our representatives. And I encourage the people in the audience to be lobbyists and talk to your representatives. Write them a letter, give them a phone call. Let's get some legislation that's meaningful passed.
Good point. Joshua?
Yeah, I think it's just critical that we continue to emphasize that every driver, every moment, every day they're on the road, it's important for them to be paying attention for that. That crash can occur in an instant, and it's important for people to recognize that every time they're behind the wheel, that what they're doing is the most important thing, is just being behind the wheel. But very encouraged by the number of coordinated efforts for communicating that to our citizens.
There's a lot going on in here, isn't there? Flint?
Couple observations. One, you will not die if you miss a text or a call, but if you take it, you may actually die. Likewise, brief story, law enforcement investigating a fatality, distracted driving incident, child texting parent, I will see you tomorrow. They didn't spell tomorrow. All they got was T-O-M-O. So my challenge to Missouri is what? What we've been talking about here today. So there's your T-O-M-O.
Good point. Katherine?
I'm very encouraged by what I see today. I think we have the right players in the room to make a difference. And so I think it's not a question of if Missouri will do something with this. I think it's when, and hopefully that will be sooner than later. It's time to get a law on the books. Thank you.
Doug?
Just to echo what Katherine just said, there are a lot of people in the room that are well equipped. I'd like to see this be a catalyst for looking beyond the traditional driving safety stakeholders and include the non-traditional stakeholders like the physicians and the corporations and the schools, and you can go on, and even the trial lawyers.
Even the trial lawyers. Okay. John?
Observation, everyone in here cares. My takeaway is those using phones are both Democrats and Republicans, right? So don't make it political. Stop distractions.
That's an excellent point. This is not a partisan discussion. We can start arguments anywhere else, but this is not partisan. Stephanie?
We don't need to wait for legislation. We all have the ability in ourselves to make the right decisions for not only us, but for the ones we love. So let's start before that even has to become a law.
So you need to work on that 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got to go backwards.
Sergeant Perkins?
That's going to be a community issue. I mean, this isn't just a law enforcement issue. It's just not a legislation issue. It's all of us working together to get that cultural shift.
Good point. Mike, AT&T.
I'm so impressed by the coalition of people we have here today. These are powerful messages coming from many different perspectives. So,
Well, I hope AT&T will continue its efforts and look at some additional ones to help us along the way. As I said before, technology got us into this. Perhaps they can help us a little bit to get out of it.
Perhaps.
Richard?
It is and has to be personal. My daughter passed her driver's test yesterday, so it has to be personal for everybody.
Not much to worry about there, is there?
So everybody, that's that, and there's a lot of opportunities to make that personal for people from a lot of different perspectives. Just keep moving all of them. Timing matters for all of it. I think it all has to move forward.
And make sure that she and her friends understand and are working as peers to remind each other, hey, we shouldn't be doing this, which is a perfect segue to Molly.
Conversation with Molly. So.
Yeah, my observation is that everyone here wants change and wants better roads and safer roads. A takeaway is for me is that there's so many different programs, even more than I either knew about or could even fathom, that I can take back to not only my school, my chapter, but my state, and really just at my level and educate my peers about and use that peer-to-peer conversation to educate about what they're doing and how it can be impactful.
Good for you. Good for you. Rick?
The show me state.
got a lot of work to do, but I think in this room there's a lot of potential. So I think by joining together, certainly at SAD, we are making Missouri a priority. It's one of our priority states for the next few years, so much so that we're bringing our national conference here to the Show Me State. We'll be in St. Louis June 28th through July 1st. We're going to be bringing thousands of high school students from all across the country here to learn with you and from you, so I hope you'll be able to join us because, as Margaret Mead said, we've got a small committed group of citizens. I think we can make a change.
Right on.
It's hard to follow this great speaker. Thank you. For parents of new teen drivers, we have a First Impact program here on campus, which does participate in the wellness program. It will be taught by Trent Brooks of MoDOT and also by James Young of MUPD, and it gets Wellness Mizzou points. So we do participate in that. And I want to say I'm sad to be here because we're here for families like his.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me sad that we have to have this meeting, but I am sure honored to be a part of it.
Let's keep that in mind as we go forward. Frank.
I think we just need to keep continuing the education part of this and educate legislators to know that this is a very serious issue.
Well said. Captain Hotz.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that not one person in this room can solve this problem, obviously. So each and every one of us has to continue to work towards that. The patrol will continue to enforce with the laws that we have out there. We'll also continue to educate with any of our traffic safety partners about the dangers of distracted driving.
Thank you. Susan.
I think that the vital ingredient is that we need society-wide, public and private partnerships needed and sustained to make driving while texting totally unacceptable and to change the culture that we are not going to stand for it anymore. Missouri already has a wonderful framework, and with all the people in this room showing support, I think that Missouri can make progress.
Eloquently stated. Thank you. Mayor Carey, who's taking the lead in Jefferson City.
Thank you. What will it take to change our behavior? And practice is key, just like today is Buckle Up Phone Down Day. So having a day where we practice not using our phone while driving. How about Phone Down Fridays? Every Friday, don't use it. And then it becomes the habit. So forming habits will change our behavior. Like our students said over here, going through class without the phones, and you can do it. And also, I think rewarding our behavior, having the app that allows you to wear jeans on Friday or whatever. And there are apps that do exist. There's one in the state of Texas that has an app for free food rewards when you practice safe driving.
Yeah, we've heard about that one, haven't we, Nicholas?
We can. I would love to, as a small business owner, I'd love to offer rewards myself here in the city. So I think having the rewarded habit, but also then creating the law, and I hope we can get that to the finish line this year in Missouri. Thank you.
Keep on. Carlos.
Yeah, we had a Mizzou student athlete in our driving simulator one day trying to text and drive, and he's at, of course, the prime of his health, and he wasn't able to do that very well. So what chance do I have as a 51-year-old with deteriorating perception reaction time to think that I can do that well?
Nicole?
So my comment would be, I think that changing the traffic safety culture can be difficult, but we need the appropriate laws, the enforcement, the education, the engineering to make a difference. And I'm very excited about the passion in this room, and I hope that we can keep this momentum going.
Okay, that has to be transformed. Jennifer.
I have a list of things for everyone to do, of course, if you know
Somehow
me.
I knew that.
One, I know Mayor Carey is going to go out and do this, but go to your city, your mayors, your city attorneys, and try to pass a resolution of support for hands-free legislation. If you work at a company, you have family members that work at companies, go to those companies, get them to endorse and support this legislation as well. You have no idea the power of that logo going to representatives' offices. Follow our page on Facebook, Hands Free Missouri. That'll keep you updated. It'll let you know. You can do things as simple as calling, emailing, targeting these people with social media, or you can join us at the Capitol as we visit their offices. We go talk to them face to face. The media being there every step of the way with these families and law enforcement and all the supporters. So these legislators know we're not going away, and you're not going to quit hearing about this until it passes. And then finally, no, this isn't an overnight fix. be patient, know that it does take education and awareness to just get the law passed, but then more education and awareness, then enforcement, and even more education and awareness, and those technology and
It's a
engineering
journey,
solutions.
not a destination.
And I think it would be great to have that hands-free law passed by the time the SAD conference happened this summer. What a great announcement and way to celebrate.
No pressure here,
Would love
folks.
to make that
No
announcement.
pressure. Patrick.
How do you follow this panel, right? I just crossed off 14 ideas to say, but I want to thank the entire panel, first of all, and everybody that's here, because your caring about this issue is the start. But what I'd also like to do is I'd like to ask everybody to look at somebody next to them. Look them in the eye. Just take a minute and look somebody in the eye, and make a commitment. Behave like that person matters, because everyone matters when you're out there on the roadway. So behave like the person you just looked in the eye matters, because they do. And maybe that action will keep each other safe while we're using this transportation network.
Thank you.
Man.
So we opened this with a lot of discussion, a little bit of pathos, if you will, the tragedies that exist out there every single day, which we cannot forget. We can't reduce it to statistics, but statistics are part of it. So we get beyond the partisanship, the fact that I believe this. No, it's not just me talking. We are dealing with the science of how our brains actually work. And together, we can make a difference. The NTSB, we will be able to continue, unfortunately, providing you with more data than we would like to. We have the scientific community here and Nicole and company keeping statistics. From the law enforcement people, we need to ask you to really ask the question, if you see something that you think is possibly distracted driving, to press that as much as you can so we get more updates on it. I think it's been made very clear that the message has to go to the legislature on a nonpartisan basis. Patrick, I'm going to echo your comments. Let me say it's been my privilege to be here and to facilitate all of you with Jennifer and Stop Distractions, our law enforcement people, MoDOT for all the great things that you are doing and leading from the front, from the Mizzou, as you refer to yourselves here, for providing us with an absolutely great venue. Thank you very much. Drive safely. Do not be distracted while you're driving. We stand adjourned.